Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We basically want to show everyone really what the consequences of climate change could be if we let this problem escalate too far.
On strike, a die-in Vancouver, and climate action rallies around the world. Also.
But I have mixed feelings. I think there could be some growing pains.
Concerns from businesses along the Broadway subway line extension. And
my husband works full-time, and I work as well, and then on those days, and we always have to scramble a little bit.
Pro-D-Day debate. What are teachers actually doing when your kids are home from school?
This is CBC Vancouver News.
500 protesters took to the streets of downtown Vancouver today, aiming to draw attention to the climate crisis.
Similar demonstrations were held around the world, people demanding world leaders adopt urgent measures to avert an environmental catastrophe.
As Deborah Goebel reports, many of those at the rally might not be old enough to vote, but they are determined to have their voices heard.
What makes this protest so unique is who organized it. Hundreds of students from across Metro Vancouver. They may not be old enough to vote, but that doesn't mean they don't have a voice.
If we start taking action now, we can have a better future.
Theirs is a generation that has only known a world facing a climate crisis.
This is why I'm here. It's important that we take a stand against what's happening.
If nothing changes from now and the time that we can vote, we won't really be able to save the earth and the environment, because that's just not enough time.
11 years. That's how long environmental scientists say we have before it's too late. So these teen organizers are calling attention to what a world without action could mean.
We're going to go in staggered groups, and the die-in will happen at 12 p.m.
Not a sit-in, they are holding a die-in. From the steps of the art gallery, they walk to the Pacific Centre food court. A whistle blows and hundreds of young people fall where they are standing. For 11 minutes, they lie there.
Just to show everyone in the food court that our deaths were to represent the dying hope of our generation. More people need to be scared. I think it's an issue that people honestly just need to panic with, because nothing's gonna change if you aren't afraid of it.
I hear the voice of a great granddaughter saying climate justice now.
From the mall, they march towards tech industries.
Which is one of the 100 most polluting companies on Earth, and it's based here in Vancouver, British Columbia. So we're going to be marching there shortly. We're going to do another die-in and a blood spill.
And again, they fall to the ground for 11 minutes. Security guards and men in suits watch from behind glass doors, but this is a peaceful protest. Young people who want to make a difference. It's also just the beginning. Next Friday, more than 10,000 students are expected to join another protest in downtown Vancouver, a worldwide strike for the environment. Deborah Goebel, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, not everyone there was skipping school. Some students were actually off today and able to make that climate protest. The reason, a professional development day.
They are an idea that first were implemented in BC schools almost 50 years ago, yet the Pro-D-Day remains a hot topic for debate.
Valpuri has more on what it is and why it happens.
No sooner than the new school year gets underway, it seems student learning is on pause as teachers go back to school.
We prefer to call them professional development days. That's more indicative of what they are for, which is for teachers to engage in professional learning.
That said, some districts call them framework days or implementation days or curriculum days. But whatever the name, the BC government allows for a maximum of 6 per school year. One of them is mandated by the Ministry of Education. The focus of the other 5 is up to individual districts, staff, and teachers.
Teachers can decide what it is that they need to work on given the needs of students in their classrooms, and any given classroom differs obviously from year to year and the needs differ.
We were wondering, does someone take attendance?
The administrator is responsible for tracking those self-directed opportunities that teachers engage in.
The frequency of Pro D days is usually one per month, anytime between September and June.
There are none in December and March because of Christmas and spring break. A benefit for teachers, Pro D days can be a challenge for parents.
That as parents we have to make arrangements to have our kids, go to maybe a community center, to be there during the day while we work.
My husband works full-time and, I work as well, and then on those days, and we always have to scramble a little bit.
About 8 BC school districts hold a couple of their professional development days in August, before the school year even starts.
That's a good idea. I didn't know that they could do that. That would be helpful, I'm sure, for many parents.
Now, you may wonder, how do BC schools stack up to others across the country? In several provinces, non-instructional days are actually determined district by district. In Toronto, public school elementary teachers get up to 7 Pro D days, public secondary teachers up to 8, and in Calgary, it's 13, with 3 of them held in August. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, many businesses along the new Broadway subway route are raising concerns tonight.
To build the new stations, it means some shops will have to close up and move altogether.
Tina Lovegreen spoke to them about the upcoming plan and the universal gain.
This corner will be where one of the stations will be for the new Broadway subway. And to make room for it, this building, the house next to it, and this other building will have to be torn down. Which means Matthew Javadi, who has been running a printing shop here for over 10 years, has to move shop.
The problem, most of my clients is in this area, and the rent is quite expensive in this area.
He estimates his rent will go up a few $1,000s.
Now I'm paying almost like a $4,000, and now I have to go for somewhere for around $7,000. So it's going to be tough.
Plus, no one likes to move, especially when you have big equipment.
This is the heaviest one, so this is the hardest one.
But he's trying to look on the bright side.
It's going to be good for everyone, all the students, everybody.
The province has locked in the 6 new locations that will be part of the extended Millennium SkyTrain line. Construction is set to begin in 2020 and service slated to begin in 2025. And across the street from the soon-to-be Fairview VGH station is Broadway Jewelers. They've been here since 1985.
Overall, it's a good thing, but I have mixed feelings. I think there could be some growing pains, as there was on Cambie corridor. A lot of business suffered a lot.
Former owner Marty Church recalls the last time there was construction in this area and hopes this time things will go much smoother.
While they say that it's not going to be as bad and that perhaps they've learned from their mistakes, we shall see. There's nothing, you can't move the store, so I hope it doesn't impact.
So in the meantime, businesses have to think long term and push past the construction and headaches that may come. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, let's move on to the federal election campaign now. And Justin Trudeau's Liberals are trying hard to turn the corner after the explosive blackface, brownface controversy.
Today, he and his campaign team were keen to talk about something else. But as David Cochran shows us, there was still more to learn about one of those pictures.
Justin Trudeau wants to pivot his campaign away from apology and back to policy. His conversation changer is gun control.
Thoughts and prayers are just not going to cut it. The choice could not be clearer. Liberals are for tougher gun laws. Conservatives are for weaker gun laws.
Trudeau is proposing to ban assault rifles and give cities the power to restrict handguns. To punctuate this message, he strolled through Toronto's Danforth neighborhood, where a 2018 shooting rampage wounded 13 and killed 2 people, including 18-year-old Liberal volunteer Reese Fallon.
Prime Minister, can I meet you?
Of course. Oh, here we go.
Along the walk, the blackface controversy came up, but this woman offered forgiveness.
Well,
people held me accountable for what I did 20 years ago, it would be hard.
I'm trying to. I hurt a lot of good people, and I'm really sorry about that.
Oh, I'm brown. Okay, I forgive you.
Forgiven by one, not forgotten by others. Questioned by reporters, Trudeau disclosed new details about this video given to Global News by the Conservative campaign.
It was a costume day for river guides on the whitewater rafting in the whitewater rafting operation that I worked at in the summer of between '92 and '94, roughly.
And once again, Trudeau could not say if there were more costume days in his past, more embarrassing photos or videos that could broadside his campaign. Trudeau is back in Ottawa tonight. He will take Saturday off before going back out on the trail on Sunday. The Liberals hope this weekend can provide a mini reset and allow their campaign to get back to the original plan. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
So let's take a look at what the Liberals are proposing with regards to gun control. It calls for a ban on military-style assault weapons such as the AR-15 that's been used in multiple mass shootings in the U.S.
But as Mark Kelly explains, gun lobbyists have been marshalling forces in hopes of swaying this election.
It's one of the most revered and reviled rifles in the world. And now the AR-15 is in the crosshairs of Canada's polarized gun debate.
This is not an assault weapon. This is a semi-automatic rifle, no different than 100 others. And if this is gone, they'll come after the rest.
That are effective in keeping Canadians safe.
The Liberals have been telegraphing a so-called assault weapons ban for months. In response, one gun group tried to trigger a run on guns.
If you don't have an AR-15, even if you do, and you've got room in your budget, go get another one. Buy 2, buy 3, buy whatever you can. You let them know that Bill Blair sent you.
And this is the ubiquitous AR-15.
There are currently some 66,000 legally purchased AR-15s in the hands of Canadians. They are restricted, meaning you can't use them for hunting, only at gun ranges. And the gun lobby, groups representing 2.2 million Canadians with firearms licenses, have spent the summer mobilizing their members with a clear message.
Well, defeat the Liberals, yes, of course. Of course, and bearing in mind that from our community's point of view, they desperately deserve to be defeated.
Do you think that the gun lobby has the power to make or break a government in Canada?
Yes, absolutely, without question.
After the École Polytechnique shooting in 1989, Heidi Rathjen brought petitions to Ottawa from 500,000 Canadians demanding a ban on so-called assault weapons. She says there's one reason it never happened.
If we were in a democracy, we'd have a ban on assault weapons a long time ago. It's not happening, and the only explanation is the strength of the gun lobby. The gun lobby is winning in the long run. It's getting worse.
CBC's Mark Kelly reporting for us tonight. And for Mark's full documentary on this, watch The Fifth Estate Sunday night, 9 o'clock on CBC television. He'll take you inside the gun lobby's fight to save assault weapons in Canada.
Fines are going up tenfold for people in Port Moody who don't follow the rules for garbage collection. It's all in an effort to protect the bears. A first offense will now cost $500, up from $50. A second time is now a $750 hit, while a third strike will result in the maximum allowable fine of $1,000. The city says it is also considering a request for another enforcement officer to patrol bins in the coming months.
And a warning for commercial truck drivers that come October 1st, if you don't chain up, you're going to pay even more. Winter tire and chain-up regulations begin on most BC highways next month. Now, drivers who don't carry chains when and where required are going to be fined $196 and $598 for not installing them during mandatory chain-ups. There are also new enhancements to the regulations for commercial vehicles over 5,000 kilograms. The province says during last winter, there were 10 extended closures on the Coquihalla, 9 of which involved commercial vehicles.
All right, time now to go to Brett Soderholm for the first look at the forecast. And it was pretty nice today, although I will admit I have pulled out all my winter jackets from storage.
You know what? I can't fault you. This is officially the last weekend of summer. And seeing footage like that already of chaining up winter tires, that is some terrifying stuff. I'm not ready for it, but don't worry, we have a full season to go before that happens. Right now, with a look at our satellite and radar, we've seen a nice clearing trend across the region. It is brilliant blue skies outside right now, though, of course, the morning started off a little bit on the cloudy side. Current temperatures, nothing to really be too scared of either. Very comfortable, around 16 degrees here at the airport, and a little warmer into the valley as we would expect. But of course, the weekend, as I said, the last one of summer, here's what we can look forward to. I wish it could be better. In some ways, we're going to get a little mix of everything. For the overnight period, lows going down to 11, just a few clouds tonight. Saturday, though, I would say more cloud than sun, but still expect a few breaks. And then late day, we're talking post-dinner time, going to be looking at some of those showers pushing in. But for Sunday, that is going to be some steady, heavy rain for much of the morning before it eventually tapers off toward the evening hours.
Okay, Brett, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
We have some happy news to end the week from the Vancouver Aquarium. Along with Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the aquarium managed to rescue a sea lion entangled in plastic.
The plan is for both boats to kind of circumnavigate the island and just take a quick survey looking for entangled animals from the boat.
Rescue staff spotted the roughly 1,100-pound Steller sea lion with a plastic packing band wrapped tightly around its neck. The depth and severity of the wound indicated the plastic had been there for some time. In order to rescue the sea lion, they had to sedate it from a distance using an air-powered dart.
The angle wasn't right on the first one, but the shot was true. The second one, the dart was heavy and the boat was moving one direction, he was moving the other. Same thing on the third shot. So no chance there with the blocking of the other sea lion. And then a little crazy stealth action to get the final shot in, but that was awesome.
Since 2013, staff have rescued more than 20 entangled sea lions. Oceanwise says it is working with the Fisheries and Oceans Canada on a stronger disentanglement program.
Good work there by them, for sure.
Definitely, and I love the sea lion noise in the back when Martin Helena was talking.
It just goes away. Just a reminder, you can watch this newscast and other CBC content wherever you go by downloading the free CBC Gem app.
CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. All you have to do is follow us on all of those platforms for extra content that you won't see on TV. Photos that shocked Canada and the world, but can Trudeau and the photos help spark a difficult conversation about race in Canada? That's next. Thanks for joining us online during our regularly scheduled 3-minute TV commercial break. When you've had to visit the hospital, you may have struggled with the gowns they provide. Now, they're paper thin, difficult to tie up, and sometimes much too revealing.
Much too revealing. They have been like that for years, but change could be coming. The CBC's Simon Nakanishi has a look at a new pilot project.
The classic hospital gown, basically a cotton sheet with 2 armholes and 2 pairs of strings. At about $4 a piece, it's a cheap way to dress patients of all shapes and sizes. But it has one major design flaw.
Nobody wants to see your, I don't know how to say that politely in English, but...
This is the gown that's been used for decades, and as anyone who spent time in a hospital knows, can be hard to tie up at the back. That can lead to some embarrassing situations. But a new designed in Montreal solution hopes to put an end to accidental exposure. Montreal Central Laundry handles linens for 60% of local hospitals. It's developed a new polyester microfiber gown, now in its 5th prototype. The garment isn't flashy, but that's the point.
Instead of having the ties in the back here, you have plastic push button in the front that you can just snap together so that the gown fits snugly. It has multiple adjustments, so it can fit a very small person, but I could also be wearing that same gown. We're getting full coverage of the patient, so they can walk around in corridors, they can get into bed, get out of bed, without part of their body showing.
It's the least that we can do to improve their comfort and their dignity.
Maisonneuve-Rosemont will be distributing the gowns to patients starting tomorrow. The CHUM and MUHC patients will also get the new threads. They cost more up front, but last longer. A modest investment that will do a lot for patient modesty. Simon Akineshny, CBC News, Montreal.
Where have these been
That's what I
all
was
of
gonna
our
say.
lives?
Yeah, two things.
Very
you would think they
simple.
would have had
Seems-
something like this.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, unfortunately, Simon was a fully clothed Simon Akineshny with the robe on.
We don't need to see anything
We don't need
more,
to see
no.
that, no. All right, stay with us. We're going to be back in a couple of seconds with more on the fallout from those Justin Trudeau racist photos. Stay with us.
Let's get back now to the topic that has dominated the headlines, the Trudeau blackface, brownface controversy. It has also triggered conversations in this country about racism, a fact for many Canadians. Here's how Justin Trudeau himself is putting it.
People are still facing discrimination and marginalization every single day. Anti-black racism, unconscious bias, systemic discrimination, they still exist. Systemic discrimination still exists. In our schools, in our universities, in our workplaces, in our communities. Racialized Canadians every day face extra barriers, extra comments, disparaging remarks that they have learned to live with as the reality of their day-to-day lives.
And we went to Surrey to ask for examples of casual racism encountered in everyday life.
The terrorist thing, because I'm brown, and they were like, oh, you're from... They just assumed I was from India and I was a terrorist. Like, sometimes they would joke about it, but then I would say I'm not, you know, a terrorist or something like that, and they would stop doing it because it would piss me off.
One time I was backing up my car, but I was new driver, and the guy said, go back to India. Then I said, I'm not from India. And then he said, though still look like you just go. But it's changed.
I see it all the time, like in the buses, you know, people sometimes don't want to give like the seats to like those certain people, or like they look at them differently, or even at school sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to talk to you, or I don't want to sit beside you, or something like that. It's like not that like directly, but I can see it happening, you know.
Those are just a few examples of racism and hurtful situations for people of color. So now, how do we move forward and open the conversation up so that we see change going forward? Joining me now is Vancouver actor Amari Newton, academic program facilitator Rabia Saida, and Milan Singh, who has a PhD in communications. Milan, why don't we start with you? Is it your feeling that the conversations about change aren't happening enough?
So for me, I think the conversations of change need to actually come out with an action plan. So we can talk about the need for apologies, and we can have those apologies, but we really need to start saying, what are we going to do about it? Because there are systemic issues that we need to address when it comes to discrimination and racism that require actually thought to be put in that.
Okay, so what does an action plan like that look like? Can either of you touch on that?
Well, I think an action plan would just be having the PM or anyone else who's caught publicly offending in this way just identify the systemic factors that played into donning an offensive costume in this way, so other people know it's not an isolated incident. It comes from a broader culture rooted in discrimination.
Rabia, your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I think when we look at, so for example, if we say that one of the incidents happened in a school setting, so when we look at the way racism takes place in institutions, perhaps we need to engage in anti-oppression training for teachers and actually make that part of the mandate, that everyone that goes through the PDP program goes through this type of training.
Is that sort of conversation happening at all in that environment right now?
You know, it happens a lot on the ground level in the frontline workers, but it's not necessarily entrenched in policy in those who create these programs. I don't think it's necessarily there yet and ready to be put into action.
Okay, so what are some of the bigger conversations that we're really not having right now that we need to have? Some of the specifics, Amory?
Well, I think just people understanding why is blackface offensive? What is the legacy that it comes from? And why one should avoid doing that, not just for reasons of offending other people, but it's just a bad look if you ever want to have a career in public office. Just don't do it.
Yeah, there's something about that unconscious bias that comes with that, and the privilege that when you think you're able to perform in either blackface or brownface, there is a white privilege behind it, or there's privilege behind it, and to be able to unmask and mask yourself and not recognize that you're playing into stereotypes requires thought around unconscious bias and these bias that people have towards one another. Because without knowing those elements, we're not able to make the changes that we're looking for. So I'm glad that Trudeau, for example, talked about the idea of his privilege. I wish he would have named it white privilege because it's different. It's like there's different forms of privilege. So I think that's something that's really standing out to me in this.
Just a general rule, people's cultures are not costumes to be worn for your pleasure. Just keep that in mind.
Is it surprising that people don't know that in this day and age, Rabia?
You know, not so much, because I don't think that as Canadian society we really talk in depth about this issue. I think it's very superficial. And so I think that when we start having these conversations more in depth and on a wider community scale, I think then perhaps, hopefully, it will become part of the norm.
Okay, thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In Vancouver, it was a die-in climate demonstration. Coming up, will the mass protests around the world actually make any difference?
The federal leaders debate is happening October 7th. Do you have a question for the party leaders? Send it in, and it could be asked. Go to cbcnews.ca/debate and submit.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
You know, I have to move. I have to go. So the problem now is tough for me because after 10 years, now I have to move.
Move or close. That is the reality for some businesses along the Broadway subway line extension. Some fear they will lose customers during the construction period.
We want change. We're serious about this. We're able to organize such strikes like this that are happening globally.
Dozens of activists, young and old, stage a climate strike die-in on the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery. They later marched through city streets, joining millions across the globe in a mass climate demonstration.
And that climate action wasn't just felt here in Vancouver, it was happening worldwide.
Stephen D'Souza was on the streets of New York, where it was clear who was the inspiration for a worldwide movement.
This is just one of the scenes here at the student climate strike in New York City, in downtown New York, Foley Square. Thousands of students have taken over the square. More than 1 million students in New York City were given the day off to come here as part of this event, one of 1,000 events going on around the country and hundreds going on around the world. And you speak to students here and they have 3 core demands. One of them is to end dependency on fossil fuels and the use of fossil fuels altogether, to protect Indigenous communities and frontline communities that are most affected by climate change, and to punish the polluters. Those are the 3 demands that students here have. They also want to embrace climate-friendly legislation. One of the organizers is actually a student by the name of Calvin Chan, who is from Canada originally, but moved here, decided to take up the cause here. I spoke with him earlier.
So we have to get the message clear. We have to get the message across to these policymakers, to these change makers, that we are the people that will be affected by climate change, and we need action now.
The inspiration for all of this, of course, is Greta Thunberg, the Swedish activist who began protesting last year, and now what started in Sweden as a small protest with 1 student has rippled around the world with thousands here in New York City. And when you talk to students here, she is clearly the inspiration.
And I think I really support Greta's cause, and I think it's really inspirational how a 16-year-old was able to rise above all of the adults who are who aren't paying attention to the earth, and inspire everyone to pay attention to it.
A lot of adults think that we're here just to skip school, but most of us in our age, we're more mature, and I feel like we could say something for ourselves, and we have opinions that matter too.
The message here is clearly personal. The students here are thinking about their future. One student we spoke with said when he thinks about college, it's not a matter of whether he can get into college, it's a matter of whether the world is even going to exist in the way he knows it, and if college is even an option. And so this is clearly designed to get people's attention, and it has. The UN is holding a number of climate events over the next week, and so that's why these events are just beginning to ramp up in the coming days to get the world's attention, to get adults' attention, but also to get the attention of corporations to make sure something happens. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
And new studies suggest climate change doesn't just pose a threat to the future. Right now, teens are increasingly experiencing what's being called eco-anxiety.
Christine Birak looks at how young Canadians are just trying to cope.
Feelings of fear.
My generation is facing a future of economic instability,
uncertainty,
food scarcity, extreme weather events,
and helplessness.
And we, the children, are desperate.
Emma Lim is pledging not to have children. As the impacts of a changing climate creep closer, a recent American survey found most teenagers are frightened, and a growing number of young people around the world are being treated for eco-anxiety.
They don't realize where it's going. It goes straight to the ocean.
Growing up on Prince Edward Island, Paige Martin started feeling nervous about climate change in high school.
When you hear about the plastic and the rising sea levels, not only us, but you hear a lot of fishermen talk about just how scary it is and how scary our future can look if we don't change our ways.
Doctors say eco-anxiety or fears around climate change aren't irrational. The environment can impact the long-term physical and mental health of children in ways that don't impact adults.
We know that children breathe more air, they eat more food, they drink more water per kilogram body weight.
The Canadian Pediatric Society recently published a list of climate-related threats to children and their bodies, noting heat and cold-related deaths disproportionately affect infants and kids, along with air pollution, contaminated water, the rising risk of infections, and the effects of extreme weather.
It's about being reassuring, but being honest about what's happening and discussing what we can do to be part of the solution.
Julia Woodhall-Melnick studied the toll flooding took on families in New Brunswick last year, sweeping away homes, precious belongings, and peace of mind. Some needed medical help to cope, but for most, a renewed sense of community was vital.
So there were instances of moms taking their, very young children and bringing them to Sandbag for their neighbors.
We were thinking of the secondhand toy sale.
Paige Martin started a nonprofit called Green Everlasting. It's given her back a sense of control over her life and shared responsibility.
They're getting out and taking action because they don't want the world to end up the way it's going.
Channeling fear, hoping they can do better for the next generation of children. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
At 6:35 on this last Friday of summer, here is a nice sunny look of the port and the North Shore. So how will summer come to an end this weekend? Well, spoiler alert, it may not look like this. Brett's got the details next.
Once a tropical storm, Imelda weakened significantly today. The heavy rain over the flooding starting to recede, but the cleanup is just getting started. The storm is being blamed for at least 4 deaths. Hundreds of people forced out of their homes needed help as they escaped the floodwaters. Officials in Harris County say there have been at least 1,700 high water rescues and evacuations. Some areas reportedly saw more than 100 centimeters of rain in a span of just 72 hours.
Wow, just look at that.
A lot.
I know.
Good to hear that things are hopefully going to get a little bit better.
It is, absolutely. When we think of how quickly it came upon, now the sad reality is it's going to take so much longer for everything to go back to normal. But yeah, the final total, in case anyone was wondering, 1.1 meters of rain was the highest total over the 72-hour period. And again, very similar to what Vancouver gets in a year. So
Puts it into perspective.
definitely it does. And in terms of perspective, I would also want to show you what it looked like this morning, because it started off very differently from the way that the day ended. But I think at the same time, it's actually a little bit more representative of how the rest of the weekend is going to be playing out. Lots of billowing clouds. We didn't see shower activity as far as I know this morning, but it did take a while for that sun to make a return over the region. And I thought it was a very fitting way to kind of end off this summer period, the last Friday of summer. In terms of what we can be expecting rainfall-wise over the weekend, I'm just going to walk you through it. Tomorrow, we're probably going to be starting the day off with a mix of sun and cloud, but there is a slight risk for a shower towards Surrey and up to the Tri-Cities. Very, very light. But the most of the rain is going to be coming late on Saturday night into the overnight period. So we're talking post-dinner hour. It is a front. It's coming along from the Pacific and going to be making its way very slowly over the region. But by far, the heaviest rain, without a doubt, this is going to be Saturday overnight into Sunday and lasting throughout at least the morning and probably into the early afternoon. By the late evening, I wouldn't be surprised to see that rain sort of ease off at least a little bit, and then we just return to cloud cover. But here's a look at how much rain we can be expecting all the way across the region. I would say very comfortably for much of the metro region, we're looking at 15 to 30 millimeters. If anyone has interest up in sea to sky region, we're talking Squamish, Whistler, Pemberton. Wouldn't be surprised to see that get even a little bit higher, potentially exceeding 30 millimeters. Temperatures, though, if you want the warmth, you're going to need to head into the interior. We're looking at a beautiful weekend for the most part into the Kootenays. Temperatures there comfortably into the low 20s. But they are going to fall, and fall is officially going to be starting on Monday, the autumnal equinox, 12:50 in the morning Pacific time. This means we are going to be getting almost exactly 12 hours of daylight. I mean, in theory, we're going to be seeing a little bit more cloud, as I'm going to show you here, but in general, we are transitioning into that season. So again, expect a few clouds for Saturday, heavier rain on Sunday, and to start off fall and to welcome it, we're going to be looking at temperatures much closer to about 15 degrees or so. So on the cooler end of things, but I feel like it's a fairly fitting way to welcome fall into the city of ours.
Not bad, a little mixed bag.
Exactly, you got it.
All right, thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
Another Trump controversy brewing tonight, this time allegations from a whistleblower that involve one of the front-running Democratic candidates, Joe Biden. We'll untangle that story next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Network, learn, and thrive at the Inspiring Indigenous Women's Leadership Summit. Get your tickets today at iwls.ca. And Anita Bathe will kick off BC Cultural Days on the CBC Vancouver Plaza on September 28th. Celebrate art and culture in your community all weekend. For more, check us out online.
Well, Donald Trump has already survived one investigation into whether he accepted foreign help to win an election.
Now Trump has another election coming, and with that, new accusations of another deal with another foreign power.
As CBC's Ellen Morrow explains, this time the extra ingredient is a mysterious whistleblower.
Donald Trump today in the midst of a state visit and mounting questions. Did he try to strike an improper deal with a foreign leader?
It's just another political hack job.
A whistleblower complaint to the intelligence community's watchdog reportedly accuses Trump of making an alarming promise. According to U.S. media outlets, it involves the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and Joe Biden's son, Hunter.
It's a partisan whistleblower. It shouldn't even have information.
That dovetails with an existing Democratic investigation into Trump's July call with Zelensky and whether Trump pressed him to investigate Hunter Biden, who once worked in Ukraine, in a quid pro quo for military assistance.
How it was that
Trump's lawyer, in his convoluted way, admitted to pressing for an investigation.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did.
You just said you didn't.
No, I didn't ask him to look into Joe Biden. I asked him to look into the allegations that related to my client, which tangentially involved Joe Biden in a massive bribery scheme.
Rudy, wait a second.
Joe Biden hit back this afternoon.
So I have no comment except the president should start to be president.
The acting director of national intelligence, sidestepping the normal process, is refusing to share the whistleblower complaint with Congress. That's fueling accusations of a cover-up.
Someone is trying to manipulate the system to keep information about an urgent matter from the Congress.
But Trump said there's nothing to find.
I've had conversations with many leaders that are always appropriate.
But his critics say if he did push a foreign leader to investigate a rival's family, it's unethical, even impeachable. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
The senior RCMP intelligence employee charged with a security breach will wait at least another week before finding out when he'll have a bail hearing. Cameron Ortis appeared in an Ottawa court this morning via video link. His lawyer told the judge he has a synopsis of the case against Ortis, but said he needs more information before attending a bail hearing. Ortis will be back in court for that on September 27th. The 47-year-old has been accused of trying to disclose classified information to a foreign entity or terrorist group.
Our Creator Network series continues with the second episode of Art is a Story. It's the 5-part documentary series exploring hidden stories about BC art.
Tonight, filmmaker Stuart Gillies and art collector Paul Crawford travel to Victoria. It's there they discover art in some surprising places.
Victoria, we're here. Why is that, Paul?
Victoria is where it all started for me. It's where I first understood what art was. It's the first time I got engaged in art. I own an art gallery here.
So you'd say this has a very important place in your heart then?
It is my heart. It's where it all began. I love this town.
What do you hope from this trip, from me being here? What can I gain?
I hope you get a real appreciation for Victoria as an important part of British Columbia's art history. And I hope you can also gain an appreciation of the richness and the diversity of the culture that exists here.
If I was to tell you that I had a house and I had, like, I'd say inside that house 2 pieces of art, one in the bathroom, one somewhere else, minimalist in fact, how would that make you feel?
It made me feel awfully stressed out. No, I'd find it shocking. First of all, the bathroom's not the best place to hang art.
Okay.
But aside from that, I think it would shock me actually for a gentleman like yourself who's traveled so far to have so little trappings of those travels.
So for me, it would be a little bit of a fear of spending thousands of dollars on a piece of art art just to feel any kind of worth in it.
It saddens me that it's being built into this industry that is for the elite, because it really isn't for the elite. It's for everybody, and it's never been more accessible than it is today.
And the best example of that is a thrift store. I'm not sure about you, but when I walk into a thrift store, the volume of items is a little bit too much, and therefore I tend to avoid them. To guide me through this sometimes overwhelming experience, Paul has taken me to one of his favorite spots.
And we're going to go on to your first thrift shop and see what treasures lie ahead. Let the adventure begin. Fantastic. Look, there's a wall of artwork right here.
Okay, so these are obviously prints.
2 prints by Paul Gauguin. There's an original etching down there. Watercolor by a well-known Victoria artist. Next to that looks to me almost like it could be a Wallace McCaskill.
Who's Wallace McCaskill?
Wallace McCaskill's a Nova Scotia, or was a Nova Scotia photographer, born in the 1800s, died in the 1950s, thereabouts. Did the photograph that was on the dime of the Blue Nose.
Okay, so he's well known.
Oh yeah, super well known, certainly highly regarded. Hand-tinted photograph, probably from the 1920s, 1930s. There every day when you pull out your change, you got a Wallace McCaskill in your hand.
Cha-ching, let's do it.
Let's do it.
It's going to be on debit. With so much art in thrift stores, it's hard to know what's worth the investment. Paul has a trick up its sleeve to show me the difference between an original and a print.
We've got a bunch of watercolors here. This is obviously a reproduction offset lithograph. But this one here, it's kind of hard to tell. From all accounts, it looks like it could be a pastel on paper. But if you want to just get a real sense of things, take a photograph of it. Get right in there. And when it comes in, zoom in, and the last thing you want to see is pixelated dots.
Oh, wow.
It tells you that it's actually a mechanically reproduced offset print. If you had an original watercolor, it would all be solid, or original pastel. You'd be able to actually see the texture of the medium.
Which is ridiculous because it looks so convincing.
It does look so convincing. Still a good deal at $25 though.
Now cue the quaint reflective music track. Having left the thrift store with my first piece of Canadian photography, Paul and I take a drive along Victoria's coastline. It's incredible that this peaceful provincial capital was and is home to many important and inspiring Canadian artists, including Michael Morris and Emily Carr.
We pass Emily Carr's grave right here in a moment. Right along here somewhere, I think it's just up here by the supermarket.
So you can't do that to me. You can't be like, there's the world's largest totem pole, and oh, Emily Carr's grave's like just in there. It makes me feel really ignorant. There's nothing around. I don't know this stuff.
Well, it's a rich and wonderful history. It's everywhere around us. We're surrounded by this history.
So why is Victoria important in the world of art?
Well, in the 1960s, it was our sort of high water mark here in Canada. It was sort of our renaissance on the West Coast.
So, my good friend Graham Newmarch has a store just here, and he's very recently decided to make Victoria his home permanently, and has invested himself quite a lot in the artistic scene. So hopefully he has some insight into everything that's going on in Victoria in 2019. Hi, Graham. So, Paul, this is my friend Graham. I've known Graham for nearly 10 years.
Pleasure to meet you.
But this is Graham's place.
What I love about the way you display your stuff is you display your stuff like art. No different than me hanging an exhibition of paintings. This used to be the Martin Batcher Gallery, and I had a gallery just across the road there. And so it's kind of neat to come back to this place and find it still featuring art, but on a very different level.
I do think that this city, not only does it have this incredibly high quality of life and this sort of ethereal, mystical, magical quality to the environment itself, it's a place for providing ample opportunities for creators.
And guess what? We're creators too, and we're going to create you a third episode. In that third episode, Paul and I dive deeper into the understanding behind one of his prized possessions, a painting on cedar from 1922 titled Mrs. Affleck.
It's called Ad Astra, and it's sending actor Brad Pitt to outer space. So is his performance out of this world? Eli Glasner has his review next.
Okay, first game Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now comes Ad Astra.
It's Brad Pitt's second big release this year. The first was a hit, but how about Ad Astra? Well, is it also worth the price of admission?
Here's Eli Glasner to try to answer that question.
This is Major Roy McBride. I'm attempting to reach Dr. Clifford McBride. This is Dr. McBride's son. Dad, I'd like to see you again.
Somewhere in the near future, Roy McBride is asked to save, well, everything. 16 years ago, his father left with a crew on a mission to search for intelligent life at the edge of the universe. Now, his father appears to be generating dangerous bursts of antimatter.
What is happening out there is a crisis of unknown magnitude. Now, we're counting on you to help us find him. Are you with us?
The answer is yes, but under this astronaut's calm, focused facade is turmoil. Brad Pitt plays a man with as few attachments as possible. Liv Tyler appears briefly in flashbacks and messages as his wife, appropriately called Eve. She's more of a vision of a woman than a fully realized character. It's only in space where Roy is at ease, the one place where he can escape the shadow of his father.
He was the first man to the outer solar system. He was a pioneer. But there was much more to him than that.
For Ad Astra, which is Latin for to the stars, the journey may be billions of kilometers, but really this is a mission of internal exploration. So if the thrust of the story is about a dysfunctional father-son relationship, why go to the stars? Well, look at the new explosion of films about astronauts, and you can see space is like the Western once was for Hollywood, an uncharted realm where a character can be truly tested and truly alone. Now, some critics are calling Ad Astra a masterpiece, but I think what stops it from truly soaring is, ironically, its reverence for Pitt. Sure, Roy is supposed to be the best of the best, unflappable, but he's so unstoppable that what little opposition is offered seems laughable. There's nothing wrong with a film about a hero, but true heroism is defined by struggle. For all the great distances Roy travels, there's little friction until the end. And yet, what ambition. Ad Astra isn't perfect, but the rare sci-fi spectacle where the inner journey is the final frontier. 4 stars out of 5. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
Eli's getting harder to predict.
Really, I didn't think he was going that high, but
It is very high.
sounds like a good one. I'm going to check it out.
Apparently there are
I'm
lots of
committing
good
to
movies.
it now, Anita. I'm committing to it
Okay.
now. I'm going to check it out.
Let me know how it is.
You asked if it was worth the price of admission.
First watch that J-Lo movie and then watch this one.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, just a reminder, you can always find this newscast online at cbc.ca/BC.
Dan Bird is here after the National at 11 o'clock. Have a good weekend.
See you Monday.